Good morning and welcome to another Seize the Day. I trust you guys are waking up and feeling really refreshed. Um, it's another beautiful day. Skies are clear, sun is beginning to shine, and we're able to just spend our morning devotions outside and just with an open Bible and hopefully with a cup of coffee. So glad to be here with you this morning. Last night, as some of you are beginning to join us this morning, last night was an awesome day. We had our young adults group. They they were part of uh, Bethany Church is a group we call Lift, and the Lift group is a group in their 20s and 30s, young career men and women, some of whom are married, but no children. And they've been a part of of Bethany for some time. And we just got together at our home, had a little dinner, made some Spanish food for them, and just enjoyed the evening. It was great just to hear their personal testimonies, what God is doing in their life, and it's just a reminder again, right, that the Holy Spirit is just working and drawing men and women to Himself in every generation. So for that, we're really grateful. And so we worked pretty good last night, and by the time everything was cleaned up, it was pretty late. So um, I had a good night's sleep, but I could use another couple of hours, I think. But it was a whole lot of fun, and looking forward to doing it again. We've been in a study now in the Gospel of Matthew. This study now is is a study that is primarily focusing on power that Jesus has been demonstrating. Power that we saw in the healing of a leper, Roman centurion, Peter's mother-in-law, not to mention many of the other people that go unnamed, but I just referred to as it says Jesus went about the countryside, right, healing the sick and those in severe pain, um, casting out evil spirits, um, just demonstrating again that he is this Messiah that has been promised, and the result of that is the people, more and more people are coming to know him and really being ministered to by Jesus. So we're in uh, today. We're looking at a passage that is found again for us in Matthew's gospel in in chapter 9, and if we look there, uh, it's in Matthew 9:18 through 26, and it's the story of Jesus healing the ruler named Jairus's daughter, and it's the first time that we will read of Jesus, raising someone from the dead. It is also a one of three that you read in the scriptures. The other one will be a widow in of Nain, another little town in Galilee, where Jesus will raise this woman's son. And the other you find is Lazarus, and um, and then the Old Testament has one story that's found in First Kings, and I thought it would be a good thing today, maybe to take a little, walk into the into the Old Testament, and read about this story. And so, what I'd like to do is have you turn in your Bibles. Well, first, yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll go to First Kings chapter 17, um, and I'll write this up on the screen so you get it. First Kings 17, um, 20 through 24. This is the general text that we're going to be looking at, and this is another illustration of God doing some really great work in the life of um, of Israel, and and this is all really a really great story. So this whole chapter actually is really a really good one. And we haven't spent some time in the Old Testament lately, so I'd like to read this text for you. Um, the one of the things that you need to remember here is that at this juncture in Israel's history, um, they are a divided nation. So you think about this whole promised land, and now it has been um, divvied up into the 12 tribes of Israel. The 12 tribes were the 12 sons of Jacob, right? So if you're following along, some of you, this is old hat, but maybe there may be a few that are still trying to put some of the pieces in this Old Testament together. So let me just give you a quick overview. God calls Abraham and gives Abraham a covenant that says, through you, Abraham, I'm going to bless all the nations of the world. He made that covenant with Abraham when he was 75 years old. But it wasn't until Abraham was 100 that he would um, have a son named Isaac. So think about this. God makes a promise that your descendants are going to be as numerous as the stars in the sky. And yet you're a very old man now and you don't have any children. And so you're thinking, yeah, maybe I misread this promise. Maybe this is not going to happen as we thought. But God does deliver on his promise. And it says, through his descendants, all the world would be blessed. God was going to give Abraham land. God's going to give Abraham um, posterity. God, and he's going to give them prosperity. So Abraham is in a position now where he is he is going to bless all the nations of the world. So Abraham has a son named Isaac. Isaac means laughter. I always point that out because I think it's pretty funny that a guy 100 would have a child and name him Laughter, because I think you would laugh too if you had a child when you were 100. Isaac then has a set of twins named Jacob and Esau, and God will use Jacob to establish um, the nation of Israel. He changes Jacob's name. Jacob means twister, supplanter, and God gives him the name Israel. And Israel will then, he has 12 sons and a daughter. Daughter's name is Dinah. But the 12 sons become representative of the nation of Israel. So whenever you read in the scriptures about the 12 tribes, they're talking about the 12 sons and their descendants. And so these 12 sons inhabit this land, right? They are brought together as a nation under Moses. They're given a law. God gives them the Ten Commandments, gives them all his all the ways in which they could know him and worship him. And think about that for a second. That's unlike so many of the pagan religions around them, who many times they didn't know, what to do, how to please them. It was always like a toss up, but not with the God of Israel. The God of Israel made it very clear how people could know him. And now in the New Testament, it's become even clearer as we have the person and the work of Jesus before us. So all of this has been a really, really good lesson for us in how God reveals to us his will, his purposes, for the sole purpose that we might not only have a better sense of our own identity, but also the way in which we can engage the world around us and God's plan for this world. So God has Jacob has 12 sons. They become the 12 tribes. But over a period of time, you begin to realize that there is all these factions that arise, and it's not long before this kingdom this land that God gives to the nation of Israel um, through the exploits of Joshua, this land now it's divided. And what we find is that we're at a period now where there is divided. There is a northern kingdom that retains the name of Israel, and then there's a southern kingdom that is known as Judah. The northern kingdom has 10 tribes. The southern kingdom has two. The kingdom of Judah and Benjamin. Those are the two tribes. And all the other 10 are part of the northern kingdom. So what we're at, where we are in this story right now, is there's a lot of apostasy that's taking place. God is going to judge the northern kingdom. There's going to come a time soon when the Assyrians, those to the north of the kingdom of Israel, are going to swoop down, and they're going to completely destroy the northern kingdom. And what will remain is the southern kingdom, known as Judah. And then about 150 years later, you're going to find Judah will also be judged. The Babylonians are going to come. The famous king Nebuchadnezzar will come and not only destroy the temple, but he will take captives and send Israel's young people scattered throughout his empire. And that's kind of the major mountain cliffs of Old Testament history. So we're at this place in Israel's history where the kingdoms are divided. They have a king, and his name is Jeroboam, and excuse me, his name is Ahab. Ahab comes in the line of uh, one of the first king in this divided in this divided nation. Was a man by the name of Jeroboam, who committed a sin by placing alternate altars in his land, one to the north and one to the south. And these were meant so that people would not go down to Jerusalem to worship anymore. So he was kind of shrewd. He thought, well, if the Israelites, now that this nation is divided, if they go back to Jerusalem, to the temple that Solomon had built, if they engage again with their brothers in worship, it's only a matter of time before my kingdom is wrenched from my hands, and maybe this will all be unified again. So to prevent that, he created two alternate altars to keep people still having a form of religion, but it just denied the very power, because that's not what God wanted. God had said his desire was always for them to come to the temple in Jerusalem to worship together. He had given them feast days. He had given them, set days on a calendar for all of the nation to gather together. It was God's way of bringing a rhythm into the nation of Israel so that they would never forget him and his provisions for them. Okay, so now we find ourselves past this first king, and now we are coming to a man named Ahab. And the text will tell you, if you look at the tail end of First Kings chapter 16, it says, Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam, right? That's the idolatrous altars that were placed. He says it wasn't enough for him to do that, but he also married Jezebel, a foreign king of the Sidonians, right? And he also began to serve Baal and worship him. So he not only persisted in these false altars, but he also began to adopt the gods of the people around him and intermarry with them. And he said he even set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. Ahab also made Asherah poles and did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than did all the kings of Israel before him. So So this is the kind of man this is, right? So now let's get to chapter 17. It says, now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishba in Gilead said to Ahab, as the Lord the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word. And then the word of the Lord came to Elijah, leave here, turn eastward, and hide in the Cherith ravine east of the Jordan. You will drink from the brook. I have ordered the ravens to feed you there. So he did what the Lord had told him, and he went to the Cherith ravine east of the Jordan and stayed there. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. A a a really extraordinary kind of service, story, one that you know it 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 tests our credulity, right? Like we sit here and we read a story like this, and we think, okay, God is going to judge the northern kingdom of Israel by bringing a famine on the land. Basically, they're not going. It's going to be a drought, and it's going to provide. It's going to prove to be a big hardship on the people of God. But all of which is meant to break the back of Ahab, who has been, provoking his people into this false idolatrous worship. And here's the interesting thing: the god Baal, he's known to be the god of the storm. What kind of storm god is this if he can't even provide rain? Like, you see the irony in this story? He's giving up on serving the God of Israel because he's going to serve the God of the storm called Baal. Only Baal has no power to bring rain. Yeah. I wonder how many times we find ourselves in situations where we're worshiping, or we're giving loyalty and allegiance to something that is really not going to provide what we really think we want. So God knows that Elijah the prophet bringing this word to Ahab is going to bring calamity upon Elijah. People are going to be hunting all over for Elijah, and you read in other places in the Old Testament that's exactly what happens. They're searching all over for Elijah, but they can't find him. Why? Because God had placed him by the Cherith ravine, and here he has water to drink, and God is going to bring him food. You talk about, home delivery. Here, the ravens are coming, and twice a day they're bringing food for Elijah. Um, Not only is Ahab given an awakening about the power of God, but also Elijah, the prophet, is also seeing how God is able to provide even in the most dire of circumstances, giving him food and protection. And yet, all the while, Elijah is also fulfilling God's will for Israel and giving them, multiple opportunities to know him, to repent, to enjoy this life that God had said he always wanted to give them. In fact, way back when Moses was leading the children of Israel out of Egypt and into the promised land, the promise of God was always the same, that if you hear these words of mine and obey them, it is so that you might have a long, fruitful life. But they'd rather do their own thing, and this is the result. Now, getting to the story then of Elijah and an Old Testament story of resurrection, I want you to realize that it said in verse 7, sometime later the brook, it dried up because there had been no rain in the land. So even the place where Elijah is staying is now being affected by this withdrawal of of rain. It says, then the word of the Lord came to him, go at once to Zarephath of Sidon and stay there. I have commanded a widow in that place to supply you with food. Now, just as a little side note, you're spending, a long time here, and God is faithfully providing for you. And then one day, the word comes to Elijah and says, "Okay, it's time for you to leave," which is implying that at one time, this was a place of blessing. But now, what do you think if Elijah disobeyed and says, "No, no, I'm not going to go"? Do you think, first of all, we see that the water is beginning to dry up, right? The brook is drying up because of the lack of rain in the land. It's beginning to even affect, where Elijah is staying. Not only that, it says twice a day the Lord brought the ravens to feed him. Do you think those ravens are going to still come? The idea here is that what once was a place of blessing now is no longer a place of blessing. Just a concrete illustration of this. My wife and I, we early on in our ministry, we were serving a church in New Jersey, and we were there for probably close to 4 years, and had a lot of friends. It was good for us as a family, and I had this opportunity to take a church in Tarrytown, New York. It was a church that needed a lot of work. They had 47 people, 27 over the age of 70. Some who are watching online today were a part of that ministry, and we're friends to this day. And I remember going to a retreat, and my wife was really leery about going. And so we went to this retreat, and the speaker spoke about Elijah on that weekend, and he particularly talked about this one episode about Elijah being at this Cherith ravine, and the word coming to him that it was time for him to go, and that what once was a place of blessing, the blessing now had moved on. God was calling him to go at once to Zarephath in Sidon and stay there. And there God said, I've already provided for your provision. So here's Elijah now torn again to take God by faith and to recognize that the place of blessing is no longer going to be the Cherith ravine. Now the place of blessing is going to be in Zarephath. And so Elijah has to put his faith into practice at that moment, and recognize that even in the midst of this famine, God took care of Elijah. And so now he was telling him again, I'm going to take care of you now in this future. So we're at this conference, we hear these messages, and they would sing this old hymn. It was called Jesus Never Fails. So my wife and I, we talk about that, saying, wow, that was a word for us. Like, we're right in the midst of these transitions, and we're worried about leaving, and should we leave? So I did go to Tarrytown to candidate, to interview for this position. And my wife and I were sitting there, and they had this one time where the congregation came together to ask me questions and just get to know us a little bit more, because they would be voting on whether or not to extend us an invitation to come. And so while we were sitting there, my wife, she's trying to process all this information. We have small children. About this move, the church needed so much work, and so she's trying to process this. In the meantime, too, I should also add, her father is dying of cancer. There's just a lot going on, and so we go, and in the middle of our talk, I look at my wife's face, and it just all of a sudden her whole demeanor changed. And I look, and there behind me on a plaque on the wall was a sign, and it said, Jesus never fails. We had just finished coming from that retreat where this example of blessing and singing that song, and now we're here in this room, and there was this outward sign, Jesus never fails. And we walked home. We got back to our rooms that night, and we were sitting there talking about that, about how God really just provided that sense of reassurance. And we had great ministry while we were in Tarrytown, and that, we always look back on those days with great fondness. Really have made some lifelong friends. So, all of which to say, like, here is this new place of blessing that God's going to bring. So let me read this story, and we're going to come back again tomorrow and read some more of this, because it's another uh, instance of resurrection and what God is demonstrating by these actions. So let's pick it up verse 10. It says, so he went to Zarephath. When he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, would you bring me a little water in a jar so that I may have a drink? And as she was going to get it, he called, and bring me, please, a piece of bread. As surely as the Lord your God lives, she replied, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. That's how grave this situation is. But God said, I've commanded a widow in that place to supply you with food. Um, it, it doesn't. God's God's at work, but it doesn't really look like that here, right? If you were Elijah and you came up and you met this widow and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the woman, yeah, and then you get that response. But notice Elijah says to her, don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first make a small cake of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me, and then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord gives rain on the land. Now, that woman, notice, like, here is a miracle. There's this miracle that Elijah has been experiencing, and so Elijah is trusting God with his future, and so he goes to Zarephath. When he's there, this woman now, she's about to experience a miracle, but the miracle is just to reinforce again that God is truthful, that He is trustworthy, that He's worthy of our allegiance and commitment. And so she goes away, did as Elijah told her, and there was food every day for Elijah and the woman and her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. Place of blessing. It's going to become an even greater place of blessing as we look tomorrow at the raising of this widow's son who passes. This is another illustration of how God is, through his miracles, not only giving people life, right, but he's giving them life so that that life may be focused on him, the author and finisher of of this life. These are all the stories that we've been going through in this New Testament, all designed to bring us to a place where we see Jesus, and as a result of that, we're able then to follow him with a sense of assurance and security that God is for us, never against us. So, great story in 1 Kings 17. We're going to finish it off tomorrow. So, Lord willing, we'll get that opportunity to do that. In the meantime, um, lean into this place of blessing where God may have you. Open up your eyes to see what God may be doing in your life today, the means by which He might be using simply to gain our attention, to make sure that our focus is always on Him and that we won't become so distracted by the things of this world. My friends, thank you so much for being a part of this morning. You go knowing God is good all the time. God bless you. And as I said, looking forward to tomorrow.